Well, hey, Frontiers family. Obviously, I couldn't be with you today. I guess, kind of on the road traveling. And this was something that Jen and I have kind of wanted to try for a little bit anyway. And so this seemed to be a really, really great opportunity or excuse to be able to do this. So, for those of you who have been coming, which has really been all of you, we've been going through Acts and talking about, sharing your story. And we get that from, kind of Acts 1:8, where Jesus says, go be my witnesses. You will be, empowered by the Holy Spirit to the ends of the earth. And just kind of using some different and maybe some modern day language to that. I see that as, we are to share our story of what Jesus has done in us and through us and who he is. And the Holy Spirit will give us the opportunities to be able to do that. And he will also give us the words to be able to do that. But sometimes when it comes to, being a witness or sharing your story, sometimes we don't know how. We don't know how because we haven't tried it before. We haven't thought it through. Sometimes we don't even know what's worth sharing in our life. And so I wanted to take, and we've been doing this for a few weeks, but wanted to take this opportunity yet again today to give space for you to share your story. But the other thing that it does, and what we're continuing to find, is this is something that truly can, unite us together. Right now, we are this small group meeting, every Sunday, and many of us don't know one another, certainly as well as maybe we would want to. And so this is simply an opportunity for us to get to know one another. And when we can hear each other's stories, then it gives us context into who we are. It gives context behind, why we are the way we are and and it gets us to know one another even better as we travel on this journey closer to Jesus with one another. It helps us to be able to support one another and be there. And so yet again today, let's share our story. And as we've gone through this, I've tried to clarify language just a little bit and what we're looking for when it comes, when it's about your story. And I'm going to say this a little bit more specifically, which is share your frontiers. Well, what's a frontier? Well, this is exactly why we've called our church Frontiers Church. A frontier is a line between two things, right? So it could be a boundary, like a physical boundary, but it also can be an emotional boundary or a spiritual boundary or a physical boundary. And there comes times in our life when we have to cross that boundary. We have to cross that frontier. And it's crossing from known into unknown. And anytime we cross from known into unknown, it often takes a giant leap of faith. Sometimes we put that faith in ourselves. Sometimes we put that faith in something else. Sometimes we just take the risk with no idea. But so often, and I would say most of the time, we put our faith in God in one way or another. And often when we cross that frontier moment, when we have the faith to cross that frontier, we often rely and trust in God differently than we did before. And we find God always comes through. It might take time, maybe even longer than we want, but eventually God always comes through when we put our trust in him as we cross those frontiers. So, what is your frontier story? And like what we've been doing, I'm going to ask some of you to share. And maybe you've shared before, but even when you shared before, it was probably with a different group of people than who's here now. If you have not yet shared, I really encourage you to do so. I understand, I get that it's scary and sometimes you don't know what to say. I'm not saying you have to go through your entire life story. I'm just saying go through a couple of those frontier moments. I can think of two right now for me. The first one would be crossing the frontier. Jen and I had been married about 2 years, and we knew we didn't want to have kids right away. But we also knew that, we got married when we were 30. So we didn't have 15 years to wait to have children, of course. So we gave it a couple of years and we made this leap, and we decided together, okay, we're ready. Let's have kids. And so we, like every guy, every dad out there, we got pregnant. And like, no, I didn't get pregnant. Obviously, Jen, it looks like I might got pregnant. Jen's the one who got pregnant, but we get pregnant with our first kid, and, we are ecstatic, over the moon. And, we've had all those conversations of, do we really want to bring another child into this world? Like, this place is crazy. Do we, here's all the things that could go wrong and all this stuff. And it was a giant moment of trusting God and trusting that God would take care of it, and that God would, because we know that as parents, we don't have enough. We don't really have what it takes. And we realized it was up to God to raise this child, and however many children we would have. And while we were over the moon, within just a few short weeks, we went in for, our first ultrasound, and I was pumped. And we get in there, and, we've never been a part of this before. And eventually the technician walks out, comes back in, walks out, comes back in, takes us to our room. And we've never been through this, so we don't even know this seems normal, I guess, to us. And a doctor came in that we had never even met before. And she sits us down and says, there's no heartbeat. It's a miscarriage. And it was devastating news. And since that moment, both of us, especially Jen, we have found so many others who have been through a similar situation. We've realized that this whole miscarriage thing happens a lot, yet it's this thing that never gets recognized, never gets spoken about. And now, we found ourselves in a place where we could eventually, help walk alongside people and just, be sad with them. But then, after that kind of had passed and it was time for, we were able to try for another child. Again, just this big frontier moment. We trusted God before, and we said, okay, God, we're ready. We're ready for kids. And the miscarriage happened. It's like, okay, God, we're going to trust you again. And we didn't know what would happen. Now, and for us at this time, God came through. Now, I think God always comes through. I just think it always looks different. We've met plenty of people who have had many, 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 many miscarriages, or other things have taken place, or they can't get, pregnant, or whatever might happen. And I don't want to say that God will always come through and you'll always have children, but God does always find an answer. It's always something that is exactly what we need. It just might be time. After that miscarriage, we've been blessed to have 3 beautiful, healthy children. But the emotions and the things that we went through, especially, Jen, after that first one, they were hard and they were devastating. Another frontier moment that I can think of, and this is one that certainly took a while, but when we were at our last church in Sioux City, at River's Edge, we, over time, I became the lead pastor there, and it was really kind of my first jump into that. And that was a lot. But after a few years, we just realized, for whatever reason, it was our time was up. And so we went ahead and we resigned from the church. Well, at that time we had 2 kids. Jen was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I was the only one with any income for our family. And I just quit that job. And it was this massive leap of faith. It was a massive frontier for us. And at first it looked like we might just end up with this really amazing job that I never could have even imagined existed. And went and interviewed, and it didn't work out. So we resigned from the church, and there was no guaranteed income. And it started this 1.5 year process where technically I wasn't unemployed, but I called it unemployed because I wasn't doing anything I loved. For me, a job has never been about money. It's been about doing something that I love. And if I can do something I love that can pay me money, even better, right? And this 1.5 year struggle, there were some really, really, really rough moments, dark moments where I was battling my own demons, if you will. Like I was battling my own stuff. And what I found was without a job that I loved, I didn't feel a sense of purpose. Now, I don't know if this is true for every guy in the world. I know that we all want purpose. We all need to feel, needed and purposeful. And we want to know that we, whatever it is, that we're there. Well, I think a lot of times for men, at least from what I've read and gathered, is that often we find our purpose through our work. And you can even kind of jump back to Genesis with, Adam and Eve and what God kind of instructs them with. And then a lot of ways, man is supposed to have, like, his purpose will come through work. And I know that there's always exceptions to the rule and all those things, but I felt no purpose. And I was confronted with some really brutal moments. I'll never forget driving home from church one day, and church was good, and we were going to go find something to eat. And I had to work that day. I had to work every Sunday, which was one of the things I really hated. I didn't have time with my family on a day that I wanted to give to family. And so, excuse me. And so something in me clicked, and man, I'm always ashamed of this story, but it's a part of what happens with through the frontier. Sometimes we take a giant risk or a giant, leap of faith. We cross that frontier and we think that, and we hope that God will answer it right away. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes we walk through the wilderness or through the desert, or we go through a tough, difficult time or valley or whatever language you want to use. And it's really hard. Well, something that day just snapped in me, and I took my fist and I started pounding the steering wheel in front of me, screaming at my family. And to this day, I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but to this day, I still have just this little scar. It's this reminder of what happens when I don't have purpose, what happens when I'm not fully trusting God, and what can happen to me when I, lose it. Well, I went home, and I think I didn't leave my bedroom for 24 hours. And I cried and cried and cried I couldn't believe what I just did. I couldn't believe what was going on in my mind. I couldn't believe that I did that in front of my kids. Jen kept coming up trying to help me walk through it and work through this. And she was in tears because she didn't know how to help me. And it was like something in me broke. And, we ended up, we were Googling and researching all kinds of things. We didn't know what it was. Is this depression? Is this mental illness? Is this what is this? And finally, we just decided before we take a drastic step, because we called, we had 2 psych units that we were ready to drive me to and drop me off at. I think it was that bad. It was that desperate. And so we decided instead to take the first step of just talking to our family doctor, and that, eventually led down this road to where I'm far healthier but I've realized some of my own little demons. Well, this would not have happened for better or for worse. Like, it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't resigned from that church. At least I don't think so. And that was halfway through this process. And eventually God opened up some doors for us, and we stepped through them and took some other, steps over some other frontiers. But these are some of the moments that have just made me who I am. And to realize that there is still so much I need from God, that I still have to rely on him and depend on him all of the time. And that I have to learn how to seek help from others. And that there's still a lot of stuff going on up here that I haven't worked out and dealt with. And that it's something I have to do. Like, I have to learn how to become more emotionally, mentally, and spiritually whole. And I find that I only make real progress when I go from the unknown, when I go from what I know and I cross this frontier of faith into the unknown, because it forces me to do new things, to be uncomfortable. And whenever I'm uncomfortable, I seek God like never before. And I don't know what your frontier moments might be, but I want to open up the floor and invite you to share your frontier moments. Just 2 of them. What are 2 times in your life when you had to do something that was unknown? You didn't know what the result would be. You were uncomfortable doing it. Maybe you were a little scared, a little frightened. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you fully trusted God through the whole thing and it was easy. Maybe you trusted God and some stuff went south and it really ruined you and wrecked you for a period of time. Maybe you're still struggling through it and trying to figure it out. Maybe you're on the other side and like you can see how God has worked through it all. Maybe you're in the midst of it right now. But what are your frontiers moments? Share your frontiers story.